All right, so the y-intercept of a parabola is 1, okay? So the y-intercept is 1, and the vertex is 1, 0. What function does the graph represent? Okay. So let's think about this. If I sketch a little graph, it says the y-intercept occurs at 1, and the vertex is here at 0 or 1, 0. In other words, there's a point here on the graph, and there's a point here on the graph. But we know that the vertex, the x value is the line of symmetry or axis of symmetry. So when x equals 1, that's the axis of symmetry. We know that because we learned that in the last section, or we should have learned it. So the line of symmetry is a vertical line that passes through the vertex. So now what that means is if I have a dot that's one space away from the line of symmetry, I also have another dot that's one space away on the other side of the line of symmetry. So let's start labeling these things. This is 0, 1. That's the y-intercept. This is 1, 0. And then this would be 2, 1, right? 2, 1. So then my graph looks like this. That's my function f of x. So now how do I figure that out? Well, there's lots of ways that I can figure that out. One way is I could write it out like this. So remember that we're given the vertex. So one way to write this is the vertex form. It's called the vertex form because the form literally incorporates the vertex in it. So it looks like this: a times the quantity x minus h plus k, where h comma k is the vertex. So when they say the vertex is 1, 0, that means that h is 1 and k equals 0. So now I've got f of x is equal to a. I'm not sure if there's an a or not. Oh, this is squared. I'm sorry. I forgot to write down the little 2 here. Don't forget that in your notes. I'm sorry, Mr. Adams. It's hard to talk and teach and write down and record videos. So then x minus, what's the value of h? 1 squared, plus k, which is 0. All right, so now I can simplify that and say f of x is equal to a times the quantity x minus 1 squared. I don't need to write down plus 0 again. I don't know what a is. But I could think of f of x. Remember, f of x is a fancy way to say y. So I can solve for a. I think it's just going to be 1, but I want to verify that. I could solve for a by plugging in a y and x value. Well, they gave us 2. So I'm going to plug in the y-intercept. I'm going to let this equal my x, and I'm going to let this equal my y. In other words, I'm going to come to this equation, and wherever there's an y, I'm going to plug in 1. And then wherever there's an x, I'm going to plug in 0. So what I'm doing is plugging in an x comma y to solve for a. So then 1 equals a times, what's 0 minus 1? Minus 1, and that's squared. What's negative 1 squared? Well, negative 1 times negative 1 is the same as negative 1 squared, but that's a positive 1. So this becomes a times 1, or we could say 1a. Well, if I want to figure out what a is, I just divide by 1, and I end up with a equals 1. So I did all that work. We're not quite done yet. I'm going to slide all the way over here a little bit, give myself a little bit of room. What's my final equation? Well, my final equation then has to be f of x is equal to 1 times, do I need to write the 1 here? No, because anything times 1 is itself, so I don't need to write that down. F of x is equal to x minus 1 squared. And let's take a little note here. A equals 1, but I don't need to write it. Okay? And that's our first example problem. I got a little heavy on all the notes that I'm writing down because I think sometimes as Mr. Adams is teaching and talking to you guys, it's very natural to kind of tune me out because you're focusing on writing stuff down and keeping up with me. I think if you see the words, write them down and read them, maybe that'll help you to understand it or remember it. I think that's the biggest thing. I don't think it's an issue of understanding, but we're remembering what to do and when to do it is sometimes a challenge because we're doing so many things in one problem.